Hey, Alejandro.
Hey, Jordan.
Thanks for coming on today. Today, to start off, we're going to talk about an awesome project that you're working on, which is a book exploring kind of a holistic view of simplifying our own body literacy and how to connect people from all backgrounds deeper with their own experience in their bodies.
Yeah.
Can you start us off with just kind of the basic concepts of not only what you're exploring, but also what led you to starting this project?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's see. The project itself is just intended to be a way for people to get some contact with the science of the body. But making it a little different than just a science textbook. It's sort of presented in a way that's more relevant to our life experience. I think, so on the one hand, there's definitely like the intent to really simplify the science of the body in terms of how the systems work and how they work together, the structure and the anatomy of the body, and just kind of looking at that. And instead of being really detailed the way a typical textbook would be, it's just kind of the gist, just the key points. But putting all of those key points then into this larger picture that has to do much more with just making contact with a sense of appreciation for the body. And I think that's really a big, when I look at what my motivation is, that's a really big part of it, is to try to evoke a sense of connection and appreciation with our own body, whatever state it's in, whatever's going on with it. Because it's because of all this functioning, all of this science happening, we could say, that we're here in the first place in this thing we call the world, or this thing we call ourself or our life, and so I feel like that's something that needs a little extra attention, right? There's plenty of information scientifically about how we understand things and how the body works. What I find is lots of times it goes to these really fun, like kind of fun facts, like really kind of wow factor things about, how much, like the length of all your blood vessels if you put them all together, things like that are amazing, that do tap us into how amazing the body is. I think I'm wanting to take one more step. I mean, I can't say that I include a lot of those kind of gee whiz kind of facts, but more just always coming back to like, it's because all of this is happening that we get to have life in the first place. So there's a kind of an honoring appreciation there. And then the other side of it is just also recognizing, because of the body that we have, or maybe because of some of the things that the body has gone through, that has a big effect or a big influence on how we live life. An easy example is when somebody is like 7 feet tall, right? That's not something they chose. It was just something that, the genetics that they inherited and how those genetics express themselves had their physical structure end up 7 feet tall. And then I think from there, it's pretty easy to see how much that affects their life in terms of being in cars or airplanes or being indoors or clothes or in a crowd. You're always way up above everything, and people are always, so that's just a really simple example of how like the makeup of our own body has a direct effect on how we experience life. Right. And so there's, countless different examples of that in terms of, all kinds of different things around, a different way of saying the same thing would be, some people have what we might call a gift, whether that's a physical gift or some sort of mental activity, or, a gift for drawing or writing, or a gift for certain kinds of like athletics. Like, again, these things are all rooted in our physical body. And that's the part of it, I think, that that the project as a whole is just really intending on wanting to bring people into. And I think there's a few things that come from that. One is like, if we can achieve like a deeper connection and a deeper appreciation for our body, that can inform our choices in life in a variety of ways. It could also influence how we perceive things. You know, like one of the points that I definitely put a big focus on is how there's this sort of dichotomy between how we're all the same and we're all different at the same time. And both of those are true. And the physical body is a very direct and easy way to see that, right? We can say that we look at a traditional anatomy book, we can say, okay, these are all the pieces and parts that make up my body. And these are generally the same pieces and parts that makes up everybody else's body. So on that level, we're all the same, you know? And then of course, when it comes down to it, we are each unique expressions of the human body. So when we go there, then we're all completely different, right? And so the physical body becomes this one thing that we can look at and see how both can be true at the same time. Now, that seems important to me because there's a lot of other parts of life where we focus on our differences and never get to where we're the same, you know? And it just seems like the focusing on our differences without staying connected to where we're the same is what leads to a lot of the conflict that we end up in, whether even that's in just within our family or circle of friends, but certainly once you get out into the larger world of different cultures and traditions and, you know, national histories and things like that people feel really connected to.
Yeah. That I love the idea of how just our own physical makeup changes how we interact with this world.
Right.
I've in my own personal experience, like I've always wanted to be a bigger guy, and I'm the envy of everyone because I eat and eat and eat and I don't gain weight. Right. And it's such a funny thing that, you know, for some reason in my heart, it's like, man, I just want to be a big dude. And it's not going to happen. But how just that fact really affects how I interact with things. You know, I played rugby and they're like, oh, okay, you're a winger or you're a fullback, you know, you're out in those positions. I'm like, no, put me in the pack. Right. Like, don't look at my body. You got to see my heart. Right. And everyone, like, I feel like that's a way we can connect deeper with each other is allowing that awareness to come in, and an awareness of the fact that all of us are, even though we have, the same makeup, we're all so very different. Right. And that's, if you can open up to that and be a little more welcoming of that fact, then it allows us to connect in a different way. That's right.
Yeah. What that brings up for me is like, I think another way of looking at what I'm trying to put together in this book and this material is, it's really just a map of what it is that we're working with in life. Right. So every one of us that's here has a body, and this is, in a physical way, this is what we're working with, right? It has needs. We need to sleep. We need to eat. You know, it needs water, hydration, certain kinds of nutrients, and all these things. And I think there's another side to it where I just feel like if we can connect with these certain things just through our physical experience, I think it might open doors for us to connect to some of these similar things in other territories, like of our psychology and psyche and, you know, thoughts, feelings, emotions, perspectives. Can maybe be a little bit more open or a little bit more flexible if we are able to more connect with what it is that we're working with ourselves, you know, kind of starting there first. The other thing I think, particularly to your example about wanting to be a bigger guy, is there are ways I think in in connecting with the body where we recognize a sense of limitation, which is really tricky in our culture, because I think culturally we're very much about, or have been very much about, trying to either let go of limitations or push past them in some way. And of course, there's a big upside to that, right? That's a lot of how innovation and kind of evolution of things happens through pushing the boundaries. But I think eventually we're also left with having to be in contact with a sense of surrender to what is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like our body is the way that it is. Even let's say after maybe there's been a big car accident and it's changed the body in some basic way. Well, there's no ever getting back to what it was before the car accident. So again, we're left with doing the best that we can with what we've got. And I think even that way of phrasing things kind of highlights the level of surrender, just, which is then what? Being present to what is.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point of allowing yourself to work from a more truthful state.
Right.
Because even if you want it to be a certain way, if you continue to live with your mind over there, then you're not going to be able to truly move forward with what you have. And it's not going to build a solid foundation for you to go from.
Yeah.
You're really just kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's, I would say the other thing, when it comes to this material, the other thing I'm really aiming for is to make this kind of information more enjoyable to get in with, because I guess I just have it that like most people in the world don't have the inclination or the desire to dig into some sort of sciencey book about the body. And yet it seems important to me because everyone has a body, because it is what everyone's working with, that everybody should have a chance to know, just to get that sense, So I'm making a very deliberate effort to condense things into, very just brief kind of ideas and overviews about the different aspects of the body. And what I'm really after, though, is seeing that whole picture. Right. It's because of all of these things are working together that results in this thing that I'm calling my life. Right. And so there's a lot of ways in which this book, as I've been working on it, is really just a book about life, but told through the lens of the physical body. Yeah. Right. And that also feels, it feels important to me because it's the level of the physical body where we can, I think, most easily connect to our sameness. Right. As soon as we get into the psychology of a given person, now things get really relative, right? In terms of perspectives and beliefs, experiences that people have had, and just everything that makes up a person's point of view. Right. And what strikes me is that no matter what point of view somebody's living in, right, no matter what reality or no matter what informs a person's reality, they're all working with muscles and bones and blood and hormones, right? That's like the lowest common denominator, where again, in spite of our differences, this is where we're the same. We all have a beating heart. We all need to breathe. We all need to eat food and sleep, and we have dreams. And, this is the territory of like where we are, I guess, it's a way to connect with how we are all just one species, right? Yeah.
I like that in the sense of like spirituality, religion, all these things that kind of point to this bigger picture of what this experience is. It's all very, is untouchable. It's unseeable. It lives in this, in the esoteric, in the ethereal realm. And there's so much ease for miscommunications around things like that.
Right.
And it causes so much strife, you know, in all these different ways. The fact that we can't see each other's minds.
That's right.
And finding more and more ways to connect with each other, I think, is what is causing all this strife right now, which I think is a beautiful thing, you know, because it means that we're digging.
That's right.
Yeah, we're trying to find new ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's easy to see how we generally learn through the trials and tribulations of things on an individual level and on the sort of group, you know, cultural or global level. Yeah. So I think we're just in that now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of my favorite Alan Watts quotes. He just says, without resistance, there is nothingness, you know, because if there is no resistance, then every experience would happen in an instant. The universe would come into being and go away in the blink of an eye because there's nothing there to slow it down.
Right.
And if you don't have these, it's a weird thing to realize that your challenges are what make you who you are. You know, they really build you into something better. And I think that we need to start celebrating our challenges more in our daily lives. And it's not to say like, you know, it doesn't suck in the moment. And I don't want you to be like, oh, well, it's okay. It's just a challenge. You know, get frustrated, get mad, get sad, feel all of it.
Yeah.
But also take into account that you're learning from this and you're growing from this, and that you also have the choice of where you go from there. And even in like the car accident idea, it's like, okay, this sucks that this happened. You know, you are different from what you were before this.
Right.
But do you want to approach it from, you know, a giving up? Do you want to approach it from a falsehood of thought of what it is now? Yeah. Or do you want to accept it and see the truth for what it is and then move forward from there?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that to me seems like so much of like, there's this sort of very base level of life itself that is just all about that, which is reconciling our experience with sort of, you know, between what is and what it is that we might prefer. You know? There's a constant push and pull between those things, right? Because I don't have it that like surrendering to things means that we give up. I mean, it's tricky. It kind of depends on the situation. In some cases, it might mean that, you know, when something, if we're like really attached to something that is never going to be another way, right? If we eventually surrender to that, we can be free from that kind of getting locked into that thing for too long, or maybe in ways that don't serve us. Yeah. You know? So on the other hand, right, then there's also, I think, you know, sometimes I think about it like on the other end of the spectrum from surrender is agency, right? Or just our ability to make choices, which is also in the mix, right? So that's where I think everyone can sort of relate to some degree about how sometimes when we're trying to make choices around something, if we have more information or awareness around that, you know, again, it affects like how the choices are, you know, the choices that we make and how they play out, because we can maybe make a choice or go about making our choices in ways that are more connected to the reality in which those choices are being made, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. A few years ago, I wrote in my journal, confidence is real when it's unshakable. And what that sentence meant to me was I want to make my decisions, my choices confidently. So I want to be able to decode the situation as much as I can and go forward from like what my heart, my mind, and everything is aligned with. And what I mean by it being unshakable is when, you know, I go now, and then it's, I get slapped in the face, you know, and I go, okay, well, that wasn't the time to go. instead of, just giving up and being like, okay, well, that didn't work. It's like, okay, well, what next? What's the next step? Now I know that led to me getting hit. What's the next step I can take that gets me back to my confidence,
right?
Gets me back in alignment with myself to where I own my choices,
right?
Instead of letting other, people give in so much to letting other people give their choices to them or make the choices for them, because they don't want to live with the outcome, oh, this was my decision, because that feels so heavy. But it's like, man, but that's the gift of being here. It's like, you really get to own your experience. And if you're able to choose that for yourself, to actually, move with confidence and move in a space of being present with yourself, then you can create much more of what you want to create for yourself.
Yeah. Like when I hear you say all that, it puts me in touch with the sense of clarity that comes with feeling confident, and almost like if we can operate from this place of just good clarity about why we're doing what we're doing, or what our intention is, or what our desired outcome is, like that kind of clarity, I think, comes with that sense of confidence, as opposed to like doing it like, I don't know, it brings up some kind of thing. If we're just really in the confidence, then we might get stuck in like trying to stay confident all the time. You know what I mean? As opposed to just getting really clear on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I think if that's the focal point, then that's kind of like the active realm of where we're actually making our choices, what motivates those choices and actions. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So in choosing to write this book, where did the idea come from? Was it something, I know you're a massage therapist, you've done a lot of body work, but what started you on wanting to, really get this into a documented?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's been a series of sort of phases over time. I can remember it starting somewhere around 2003, which was about the time that like I had gone to the massage school I went to here in Denver, and had an amazing experience. Just for the first time being in biological sciences, right? Like I had done whatever I did in high school. In college, I got a degree in engineering, and that was a whole deal of like figuring out what I definitely don't want to do with my life. Even though I had aptitude, I thought it was interesting. I just didn't have the bigger sense of connection with doing that sort of as a bigger vocation. So when I graduated, I had some time to think about what else, if it's not this. Massage therapy was something I picked and then pursued. And then, so there I am in massage school, and I felt like, it was a year-long program. My classes once a week. And I felt like almost every week I had some sort of like epiphany moment, just very much in the spirit of what I've been saying about this book project, right? Which is just like the wow of like everything that we were learning about in anatomy and physiology are all things that I have. They're all here with me now, and they have always been, and they are totally a part of how I get to experience the world. And there was just a kind of a deep appreciation that just got really rooted in then. And then the other thing that showed up then was like, why aren't we learning this as kids? Now, I can remember at different points, like having like a health class or, definitely touching in on it in different ways. But I feel like there's got to be ways to, basically introduce people to their own body, like at an earlier age, basically through school, that includes a lot more kind of direct, activity with it, and I guess people could make a case that when they had PE, I don't even know if they have it anymore, but like that was a way to do that, but it was never really contextualized, as like specifically a way to connect with your body and appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
Always more about playing sports, and then there's all the kind of drama of being kids. And
how many pull-ups you could do.
But that's kind of where the thought was, is like, why didn't I know any of this before? Why doesn't anybody else, it's only sort of specialists that get in tune with. So it's one thing, I think, for specialist information in other territories, but what makes the body different is that everyone has one, no matter what they're up to.
Yeah.
And that's something that's always kind of lit me up about teaching body over time, was that no matter who it is or where they're coming from, they have a direct relationship to everything that we're talking about here, whether it's the skin or sensations or digestion, any of it really. So, that kind of interest and curiosity then led me to, I put my name in the hat to teach anatomy for them. Because, I think I had a good enough sense that you didn't have to have like a college degree in physiology to teach at a massage school. I think I believed in my ability to do something like that. And I don't know where that even came from. I hadn't had that many teaching opportunities before then, but pretty quickly after I jumped into it, I started to notice, like I would get high from it. Like class would be over and I'd feel really just turned on and activated. And that's kind of like after my journey through college and kind of arriving at a place where I wasn't really feeling connected to what I was doing, that sort of became the most important thing. It's like, whatever I want to do, I want to feel connected to. And I was sort of using how I felt when I did things as a little bit of a compass in terms of a direction of making choices about what I might pursue. And so teaching anatomy at the massage school ended up just being something to do for myself and just kind of get further into the information. I had always heard that if you want to really learn something, teach it. So I sort of acted upon that. And then pretty quickly, like I was saying, once I got into it, I just, I don't know. I like the highness I would get, I think often came from being in conversations with the students about whatever we were talking about. And I think it came natural to me to link whatever we were talking about in this very sciencey way to what we experience in our daily lives, and so that's when, like, pretty soon after that kind of highness started happening, I started thinking about doing some sort of like 2-day seminar workshop, like a crash course in the human body thing, specifically for lay people. And also around that time, I got into teaching yoga and did that at a studio downtown for a few years. And I think along the whole way, I was also getting more and more into a lot of different Eastern philosophies. Yoga has its philosophy in addition to the practices. I was exposed a lot to Chinese medicine at the time because there was a Chinese medicine school in the same building. So I got really curious about that tradition. And then things like Tai Chi and just other traditions from the East, Zen and Taoism. And I do see in a lot of ways how much my kind of investigation and contact with those Eastern philosophies are a part of what I'm trying to do here with this book. In the sense of just bringing just basic information about the nature of the body forward in a way that's like, I think this is something I haven't mentioned yet, but even on the paper, I want it to be different. It's not just going to be a book of paragraph.
Yeah.
Right. That exists. Instead, I'm inspired by poetry books and other kinds of books that do the format of the language on the page a little differently. So what that means is, there's a lot of these paragraphs I've written, I've broken up and sort of written them vertically, the way a poem would be written in like short phrases stacked on each other. And even though it's not necessarily meant to be poetic in terms of rhyming or, anything like that, I do find that when I look at the words on the page like that, it kind of helps the density of what I'm putting down there be taken in bite by bite, And that's kind of what I'm going for, is to take these really sort of dense ideas, kind of spread them out. And then even just on a given page, there might just be one of those, or there might, like on some pages, there'll just be one sentence or one paragraph for emphasis, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there'll definitely be illustrations at some point. I'm not sure the extent of them, or I don't imagine it being too illustration heavy, because there's already plenty of very well illustrated anatomy books, you know, and well illustrated physiology textbooks, right? So this is kind of maybe just a starter for people, right? For anyone who then is left with more questions, there's plenty of other sources out there. But for people who just want to get a good gist of things, right? And then to be encouraged to ultimately have appreciation for what's here.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of what I'm going for. So it's really as much of an art book as it is a science book. And that's very much on purpose, because I feel like the dense science textbooks are put a lot of people off. They just don't have the patience for it, or they don't, you know, whatever the reason is, it's less accessible. And so I'm trying to use an artistic way of expressing things to make it more accessible, you know, in terms of even something that could be, I think in the long run, this book could be something that people might go back to once in a while and just be refreshed on how cool their body is, you know, just be reminded, because that's another key point. I think some of the motivation behind the book is from a place where it's so easy to take the body for granted till it's broken or sick or hurt or changed in some way. And so there's a lot of, I think, the spirit of what I'm trying to do that is trying to help us stay connected to it. You know, whatever the opposite of taking something for granted is, you know, not taking it for granted, which means like being in connection and appreciation of it while it's here, while it's functioning fully. Right. And there's a lot of ways I think we can kind of get lost in our own sort of stuff about things. And then we're just not, just the ability to come back and be, oh, okay, you know, this is here. This is what has me here. Like that's a phrase that comes up for me a lot. Like the body is what has us here, you know, and therein lies the marvel and wonder and the appreciation of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such worthwhile concepts to me. Growing up, I got into weightlifting on my own. Actually came from being bullied and stuff. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to stop people from bullying me. I'm going to get strong. And the only thing I had was muscle and fitness magazines, which is bodybuilding magazines, which had me doing a lot of isolation exercises and stuff that actually got my body out of tune with itself more than in tune. And I think, so now I'm much more, in a more whole body approach with all of the workouts I do, and even how I hold myself throughout the day. And I think I try to present that to people when I notice it, and I ask them to do the same of, you know, things like posture, how you engage yourself, how you engage with your body. Right. Because all of these things we don't realize are, again, choices that kind of build momentum. Of, you know, even just picking something up with the wrong form, you begin to create that wrong form as how you pick things up.
That's right.
And if you aren't aware of your body, you know, body awareness, I think, is what this all comes back to, is just connecting with the fact that you're in control of this thing. And if you don't take like present and personal awareness of it to a degree where you're paying attention to it, then you're really letting yourself down. And in time, it's going to, you know, it's what gives out, you know, those parts of you. Like I remember just seeing an old guy get up out of a chair, and him standing looked like he was sitting in a chair. And I was like, whoa, all right. Stand up straight, push that chest out a little bit. Yeah. And I think it's like so necessary for kids to learn it, you know, because it builds, again, a foundation to build upon that people aren't even being accountable for.
Right.
They're not holding themselves accountable for. And we've changed so much in the last 100 years of how we get around, how we travel, how our body moves throughout the day. I can't imagine we've sat around as much as we do now in the past, you know. So our bodies are literally changing with the times.
That's right.
And the tides of technology and where we're at.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just such a worthwhile thing to connect back into your body, also for your mind.
Right.
Because something I've been telling a lot of my friends lately, you know, when they come to me with, you know, problems and ways that they're depressed or anxious, or, you know, do you want to get out of your mind? Get into your body, you know, and do squats until you're breathing heavy. Go run, sprint, you know, go run sprints. You will forget what you were thinking about at the beginning when your heart is just thumping and you're sweating and out of breath. And it's in connecting with kind of the constellation of your own self. Like, I feel like that's what the body is.
Yeah.
It's where your coordinates are in space-time.
That's right.
And if you are not connecting with that in yourself, then you're not holding that container in a more mindful way. Mm-hmm. And that's when things can get away from you quickly.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it brings up for me, like recently I had a conversation about embodiment. It was just like an open question, you know, in terms of what does that really mean? Like when we embody something. And there was something you just said about, you know, you being able to use physical activity to change your mind state in some way. Right? Yeah. That if you like put yourself in some sort of strenuous exercise, that it'll get you out of whatever kind of mental place that you might be in. And yeah, that seems like just a good go-to sort of choice to make when we're faced with a certain situation. But in the realm of embodiment, right, it also kind of speaks to how connected the body and the mind really are. You know, in fact, it might be more accurate to sort of name them as a single thing. Right. We might call it a body mind. You know, culturally, we're used to thinking my mind this and my body that. And there's certainly a territory where that's true, but there's also a truth to where like they're very much crossed over, right? Like in other words, as far as I can tell, if the body stops functioning, the mind goes away. Yeah. Right? Now, I can't speak to what happens after, you know, I don't know, honestly, what happens after the body it stops functioning in terms of if there's any sense of like a conscious sense of self that maintains itself in other realm. I have no idea. Yeah. But what I do know is that as long as we're here in this realm, this physical universe, it's this physical body that gives us access to all of what's here. And embodiment then seems to be, at least ideally, a sense of like where what's happening in our mind is completely connected to what's happening with our body and vice versa. Right? I think about it more in terms of like dance expression or even if it's like you mentioned posture, like the embodiment of clarity or confidence, right? That there is body language. Yeah. Right. And there's ways in which the physical body expresses what's happening behind the scenes, you know, in the mind. And so there's lots of ways in which I think focusing on the idea of embodiment, like what would it be like for me to embody my feelings for 5 minutes? Maybe that helps to sort of move something or open something in a useful way, you know? But it definitely, I think in the end, it like a lot of what we're talking about here about life and certainly this book project as a whole is really about mindfulness, being more mindful of like what's actually going on here with the physical body, and being more mindful of how my body influences my experience in different ways. Being mindful about the choices that I make around my body in this way or that way. And I guess I have it that like, if we can just start there, being mindful of the physical body, it's going to make it more, maybe more available to be mindful in the other parts of life. So like that, I think that's been a recurring theme for me in working on this project, is the ways that if we just start here with the physical, the kind of undeniable, we can't argue about bones. We can argue about our ideas about life and reality and what happens after death. But I think we can all agree that there's muscles and bones operating here.
Yeah.
And on that note, I also like to, this is a part of my introduction in the book, which is staying connected to a little bit of what the Eastern philosophies bring to the table, which is to say the body is not what we are, right? There's different ways of seeing that. And in one sense, it's like the body is not what we are, it's what we have. Just like we have thoughts and we have feelings, but we wouldn't say we are our thoughts, or we wouldn't say that we are our feelings. We're just having those things. So the physical body can be looked at in the same way, that this is not who I am, but it's what I have. Right. And I think a way to try to really connect with that is like, if I lose a part of my body, if I lose an arm in an accident, as far as I can tell, I'll still be me.
Yeah.
I'll have one arm instead of two, and that's really going to affect how my life operates, which reinforces the point made earlier about how much the state of our body influences our experience, Yeah. But the part of me having experience doesn't change. It's now I'm just having it without an arm.
Yeah.
Right? Or without an eye, or whatever it is, it's just like, it all goes to show, I think those things go to show ways in which this idea has some validity to it, right? That, or the kind of classic fairy tales about not judging a book by its cover, or the ugly duckling and some of those things, right? So my face is just what I have, but there could be something that happens that changes my face in a radical way. Now my face is different, but the me having the experience of living life is still the same, the personality or the sense of self.
Yeah.
So, I think that's another important thing to stay connected to, because especially in our culture, I feel like we can easily become super over-identified with our body, right? That I am my face, or I am, my illness, or I am these things, as opposed to this is just what I'm having an experience with, right? It seems like there's something really valuable for us to kind of get, just tackling that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times our sense of self and what we're identified with can really get in the way of experiencing life as it is, or getting more out of the life that we're living, because we've got strong ideas about things. And it just seems like maybe if we start to work with this disidentification idea just around our physical body, again, maybe we can disidentify in other ways that are useful, because I think it's easy to see how sometimes, like, if we are really super identified with our physical state or our physical appearance, there's upsides to that, like anything, like in terms of self-esteem, or maybe somebody who decorates themselves in a very beautiful way that brings joy to people in some way, or it could be stage, theater people, or just for the fun of it. So that's not to discount the physical part of our experience, but I think this idea is meant to just balance it a little bit by hopefully recognizing that, like, the body that we've been given here and that we're working with, is malleable, changeable thing. And the more we're identified with it, the more suffering we're going to have in some sense, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Letting those character traits or those little things kind of pigeonhole you into who you are.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's super important. I love the idea of just the mindfulness of, like, that's what I feel I got from yoga was learning how to check in with my body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something when I give massages to people. I had one of my friends, I started giving him a massage. He said, well, you don't really realize how messed up you are until somebody starts touching you and exploring.
That's right.
And I think that element brings a lot to your presence with yourself is having check-ins, you know.
Yeah.
I work construction as my day job, and you know, the guys, I stretch there all the time, but nobody I work with does. You know, they might do one little just little twist, but you know, we don't even get warmed up to do these physical labor jobs. And even to go and sit at a desk, like you gotta wake your body up before even holding a position. Yeah. So then you're literally holding a static position, but it's so easy to just kind of let the chair mold you instead of kind of molding yourself to the chair. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. That makes me think of a few things. Like one, you know, there's another way in which, for me, I think this book is just meant to offer insights into the physical body that are based in the science of it. And so in this one, like the example that you just gave, like this has been a really big one for me. Because you know, I start teaching anatomy at the massage school while I get my massage practice going. And I ended up doing that for about 8 years, and I still do massage therapy. So that's been, you know, I think going on like 16 or 17 years now. And, you know, so much of the time it's like people, you know, come in with whatever ailment they might be having, looking to get some sort of resolution through massage therapy. And over time I realized that, even if I was actually able to put somebody back together perfectly in 90 minutes, if they don't change some of their basic patterns and habits of how they move and how they sit and what they do on a day-to-day basis, it's all going to just go back to where it was, you know? So that's what brings in this mindfulness piece. And it's particularly oriented around this one, like I think a lot of my ideas about the body are oriented around this one basic insight, right? Which is that the tissues of the body are constantly sensitive to and adapt to whatever they experience. Right. And there's a few ways to see this. I think weightlifting is the most probably direct. So if we lift weights in a particular way, let's say biceps curls, and we do that consistently over time, right? What happens? Like the biceps or all the muscles that we use, including the biceps, get larger and stronger because of that consistent experience that we're giving them. Right? You do biceps curls, like, you know, work out really hard one day and not again for the rest of the year, right? You're not going to see the change. It's the consistency that matters. And it also highlights how much sensitivity there is in the body to, like, okay, we're doing this regularly. We're going to have to respond and build up more muscle tissue. We can also see this in the bones and in the skin. I guess I have it that it probably exists in every tissue of the body, but like calluses on the skin, right? They develop from repetitive use of the hands, whether that's on the fingertips from playing a stringed instrument, right? Or just using hand tools a lot, right? People develop these thicker calluses, sometimes even on the feet. And all of those are examples of where the skin, because of repetitive experience, has responded and built up thicker skin. If those activities go away, the calluses don't linger around. Yeah. Right? And then famously, like when people spend time in space on the space station, right, they lose bone mass and muscle mass very quickly. So I remember hearing an interview with a guy who had spent 6 months up there, and he said that, you know, they're constantly doing tests on everyone's bodies before and after and during. And the bone scan came back and showed that he had lost 30% of his bone density in 6 months in space. So what that shows is gravity's influence. Because gravity is removed, and because the structural tissues of the body, the muscles and bones, connective tissue in particular, because they don't have all this weight to bear, they adapt by, well, we don't need this extra bone density, or we don't need this extra muscle mass because we're not using it, you know? So all of those are really clear examples of where the physical tissues of the body are really kind of a reflection of both our genetic inheritance, but also what we've chosen to do in our days, you know, whether it's weightlifting or running or sitting at a desk or whatever it is. Like it's like, for me, the insight is that the body is always adapting to what we're giving it.
Yeah.
And if we're giving it sitting on a couch for hours and hours, it's going to adapt to that.
Yeah.
You know? And if we give it sitting at a desk, it's going to adapt to that. And some of these adaptations aren't always good in the long run, right? Because we start building up imbalances. We use these muscles more than those. And if we do that long enough, now we might have a more serious difference of force across a given joint. And then we have joint pain, you know? So I think all the years of doing massage therapy kind of just had me thinking, like, how can I get people to take another step? Right. So even if what I do over the course of a session or the course of a series of bodywork sessions, it was also really clear to me that the patterns in the tissues are really rooted in the nervous system, right? They're really rooted in that part of the nervous system that, like, oh, this is what it feels like to sit.
Yeah.
And this is what it feels like to stand, you know? And some of those patterns we have may not be that good for the structure, but they feel normal to us.
Yeah.
So then that's where it feels hard to change. Like, well, why would I want to change this? It doesn't feel good when I put myself with this. If I sit up straight, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
You know? But that's only because we haven't been doing it. And we just have to gradually over time give it that experience so that eventually standing or sitting with a tall spine becomes what feels normal.
Yeah.
You know? And I think there's something there, right? So what I did over time was, like, I started using yoga. Like, I would sort of customize yoga poses for whatever issue people would have. So that way I could give them something to work with that addresses the specific area that they're having troubles with, you know? Because I mean, it's certainly not all the physical pain we have, but a lot of it does come from these musculoskeletal imbalances that we develop because of our activities even. You know, sometimes I even think about a given exercise can use the body in such a specific way that we actually develop vulnerabilities. Yeah. Because it's really fit and healthy to do this one exercise, but you put it in some other situations and it actually is, it's a liability, I guess, you know? So that's where I started thinking about, well, what's ideal here for just about anybody is to have some way, some sort of practice where we put the body through all of its paces. And over time, the two things that stand out to me the most are yoga and Tai Chi, right? And I think of them as body maintenance practices, which purely comes from this idea that the body's tissues are always adapting to whatever experience we give them. So if we, through something like Tai Chi or yoga, if we give them the experience of full range of motion and flexibility and that kind of core strength that's only based on gravity and the weight of the body, you know, how to hold ourselves in gravity, upside down, right side up, sideways, you know, whatever the pose is, to be able to take the body through all of its paces, it keeps us from developing those liabilities, right? Which I think for the long run keeps the body in a better place, less likely to be injured, you know? Less likely to get to a place where, because of some other repetitive motion, that we end up with a problem. Like, so, like one of my favorite examples around this has been a longtime client I have who plays cello professionally, right? The cello is a big instrument. It sits in between the legs of the player. They have to hold their arms up in the air in order to play the instrument and hold them there for long periods of time, like just holding the arms up in the air.
Yeah.
And so over time, the body, like I was saying before, will adapt and adjust and build up the necessary strength, the necessary kind of structure to support that repetitive experience. And then this woman, as she's gotten older, right? She's in her 50s now, like she's needing more maintenance because her body's response to playing the instrument has developed patterns that now become problems, you know, in her regular life. Yeah. They still apply very well to playing cello, but doing other things, right? There's an imbalance of muscle development, or there's a difference in her joints in terms of how freely she moves them. And I think that's why we need to have something. I don't care what you call it. If it's yoga, tai chi, or something you make up yourself, but it has to be something where we take the body through all of its paces so that we maintain that resiliency, that ability to do lots of different things and not get injured along the way, you know?
Yeah. You bring up so many good points there. You know, the idea of like, we're only as strong as our weakest link. That's something I've been bringing up to my friends a lot of like, listen, don't go to you haven't worked out in 10 years. Right. Don't go to the gym and start trying to do bench press. Right. Like just work on connecting with that, you know, all those parts of your bodies. And I'm like, it seems like the wildest thing, but the hardest things are usually the smallest movements, you know, little balancing, you know, just lifting your back up, all these little things against gravity, like you're saying.
Right.
That's the most important workouts you can do, you know, before you do anything with adding weights or resistance or anything. There's already a lot of resistance that we're working with every single day.
Totally.
And if we can tap into that and connect more deeply with our own bodies in that way, then we can begin to, just like you're saying, balance everything out so that we don't have those weak links that are growing. I definitely got that from just lifting weights all the time, and I'd be a lot bulkier muscle wise compared to my friends, but they'd still be stronger because I've been doing all these just curls and stuff, and they've been actually picking things up and throwing them, which makes you a lot better at picking things up and throwing them. And also just in the sense of, I love the idea of being more mindful with your body post treatment. Of massage, chiropractic, all that kind of stuff. I have friends that, I love going to the chiropractor. It just fixes me right up. And it's like, but then, you know, a month or so later you go back, right? Well, yeah, you know, I still get that same spot. And it's like, well, that's never going to go away unless you do it.
Right.
You know, you have to figure out what part of yourself is held in a not necessarily incorrect way, but just not balanced.
Right.
You know, and that's even in NFL, they've found that most muscle tears, most pulls and all of that just comes from one muscle being, you know, smaller than the others, weaker than the others. So you got these big quads that you're trying to drive through people with, but you haven't been working on that part of your hamstring, and boop, you know, down you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I think going back to gravity just as a primary reference point, you know, it's like, so our posture at any moment is, the way I like to say it is like, it is our relationship with gravity, right? Gravity is this thing that the mass of the earth generates. It holds everything to the surface. You know, it's actually a pretty big driver of how nature operates as a whole, right? It's like what makes water run downhill. And the whole thing. And so I think, you know, there's a couple of things here. Like there's, in terms of what is it to be mindful of our physical body at any point, it's to tap into the felt sense, right? That like, if you strip everything down, it seems like the two things that are always happening in the present are sensations and breathing. Right. Of course, thoughts are typically there, but they don't have to be there. Right. You can get yourself to, with practice, kind of a thoughtless space. So even, you know, so maybe we could add thoughts as a third layer. Right. But it's the felt sense of being in the body that gives us the reference point if how things are going, right? If it's feels good or if it doesn't feel good, right? And so I feel like for me, posture has been something that, like the ideas that I've kind of built up around it is that if we achieve what I think of as a harmonious posture with gravity, what we're going to feel is easefulness, right? Primarily in the sense of even just like the bones are doing more of the work of holding the body up. The muscles are then just kind of holding the bones in a certain position. And with that position, the weight of the body goes through the stiff bones and into the ground, right? The contrast to that is like if I hold my head in front of my shoulders and habitually do so, just looking at a phone or at a computer, then gravity is pulling on my head in front of my body. And now the muscles of my neck have to work extra hard to resist gravity. This is the weight of my head, right? If I learn how to hold my head up on top of the structure, then those muscles don't have to work as hard, right? So this is kind of working backwards from people who have chronic neck tension or chronic neck pain, right? Like it's sort of from a massage therapy point of view, the general assumption I always make that if a muscle is really tight, the assumption I make that there are a lot of demands being placed on it. Then the trick is like, well, what are those demands, right? Some of those demands might come from activities, from work, or from exercise or hobbies. And then the rest of it's going to come from how do we actually hold ourselves in gravity on a moment to moment basis, right? So I like this way of orienting things because you're always tapping into your felt sense of your physical body. Like, how is it doing? How does this feel easy or hard? You know? And then B, like that felt sense is always happening in the moment and it keeps us connected to this thing that we call gravity, which then, I don't know, both of those things together are sort of a way to begin mindfulness in a physical sense. You know? 'Cause I actually think that if we achieve easefulness in a exercise activity, that we can just enjoy the easefulness instead of always needing to push to the next level. You know what I mean? Of like, of course, you know, with certain kinds of goals, like Olympics, or maybe it's something like just running a triathlon, there is a need to sort of push, but then I think I would just have people recognize that there's a risk to that push.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean don't push. Just know that you're taking a risk and maybe you can do things along the way to minimize the risk of, risk of what? Injury.
Yeah.
Right? So, I just think there's something there for us, particularly in the day to day, you know, in terms of how we relate to how the bodies are feeling. Like bringing in this kind of gravity idea is just a very easy, direct, general way of getting in there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, another way of thinking about it is like, so each of the different yoga poses are a different relationship with gravity, right? Upside down, right side up, or, whichever it is. And that, kind of the way that I have it is that at the beginning, we might have to condition our body to do that pose. And that's both maybe some strengthening, some flexibility. Once those things come into play and we have a sense of relative ease in the pose, I feel like then we go further into the ease. And then we can develop a foundation of doing physical things with some easefulness in the mix, because I think for me, that's the best way we can try to avoid injury in the long run.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I was helping my brother push his car out of the snow the other day. Right. So I was working as hard as I could, but I was also very mindful of how my body was aligned to try to find sort of a sense of easefulness in that strong exertion.
Yeah.
So it sounds a little bit contradictory, but I think maybe that's even my point.
Yeah.
Is to like, how could we have exertion with easefulness at the same time?
Yeah.
Because so many of the times when we just focus on the exertion and it's like, I just got to get 3 sets done no matter what, then that's where we can injure ourselves. And again, like for me as a massage therapist, I've seen mostly people on the other side of that, right?
Yeah.
They've injured themselves or they keep re-injuring themselves because they're not getting there's a certain resistance to changing how they operate. What I would say is like, it's a lot of these things, a lot of these ideas don't mean we have to stop doing what we're doing. It just means we have to change how we're doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been much of a weightlifter, but I can easily imagine weightlifting in a way that incorporates this easeful mindset, which for me would mean like, how do I use my structure more, right? To really like, and then of course all the muscles are collaborating there. So it's not like they're being ignored. But in terms of like using the body as a single unit, right? That's where we're most, we're most likely to not get injured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've really brought into my practice more is like, if I'm doing an overhead press back in the day, it'd be like, come on, shoulders.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, how does my core help this press? How does my back help this press? How does grounding my hips into the seat help this?
That's right.
And in using your body as one unit, it's so, because that's what I think, like, especially for me getting into like bodybuilding magazines when I was trying to get stronger,
right?
It's such a tearing apart of the body of like, all right, this muscle, it's all the details instead of looking at the whole thing as a working, unified piece.
Right.
And it's the most important because you want your whole unit to be strong,
right.
And I think what we're talking about mainly here is like being a good body owner.
Yeah.
Like
right.
You're in ownership of this and you have to take into account all these different things. One point you brought up there that hit me was like when a muscle is tight, seeing what is causing that to be overloaded. Because so many people think that it's kind of like looking at the symptom as the cause.
Right.
And normally it isn't.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is happening because X, Y, and Z, there are all these other pieces that are causing this over here to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that it's like, that's the place of, there's a place of unbalance that leads to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's such a important thing for everyone to get back into their bodies. And that's why I really appreciate the book that you're writing and the project that you're undertaking.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I've had to go through learning on my own. And I did it through making a lot of mistakes, of just working out in such silly ways that led to me being no stronger than I was before, or much less stronger than I could have been.
Right.
I weighed 20 pounds less than I did when I was 21.
Right.
And that was more muscle, but I'm way stronger than I was there because I have a more whole body approach to how I interact with the world.
Yeah.
And I think for everyone, I think that gravity is like the number one place to start.
Yeah.
Like your relationship with gravity. My friends always ask me for like workout tips and things, and I'm like, stand on one foot.
Yeah.
See how long you can do that. Put your arms up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And like just that exploration of yourself, of how you can just move against yourself.
Right.
There's the idea of like, yoga is a martial art that you train against yourself.
Right.
Like you are constantly in figuring out your relation to yourself in space time.
Right.
Of how you move through space.
That's right.
And, it's what creates ballet dancers. You're like, oh, that looks really easy.
Yeah.
Okay, try it.
Totally.
It's like they've just learned how to move through space in a way that looks very graceful.
Right. Through practice and intention and mindfulness. And
yeah. That's like my equation for this year was conscious effort over time.
Yeah.
It's like that equals your results. Like if you put very mindful effort, and I think it was Bruce Lee has a quote, of consistent effort will always trump like short-term intensity.
Right.
Like just you have to be willing to go the distance with it.
Right.
And to actually, and it's weird because it seems harder, but it's so much easier. Right. Because you don't have to do these grandiose things. You don't have to take on so much. You can really take these small steps that lead to just much bigger outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes patience.
Yeah.
And sometimes patience is hard to come by.
Yeah.
We're like, because we live in a culture that wants it now.
Yeah.
And I think to one degree or another, it seems to me that that's rubbed off on everybody.
Yeah.
They lose patience and then give up or move on or something,
Yeah. Yeah. And I would hope that people would give themselves a little bit of patience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your project or what you're working on? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's one thing I thought I might include also is just like the kind of the overview of how I've structured the presentation of the book, right? Yeah. So the intro is basically, at this point, it sits in six parts. And so the intro, I think, touches on a lot of the things I've already talked about, is in terms of like where I'm coming from and kind of encouraging the reader to come into kind of a beginner's mind about the body, and their experience of it. And what are the values behind choosing a beginner's mind kind of mindset, right? I have one statement at the beginning of the book that just says, revealing the obvious. Because I feel like it's a little bit what I'm trying to do, right? The obvious being like this thing that we all have. Like, oh yeah, I know I have lungs and I know I have to breathe, or I know I have a stomach and I need to eat. But trying to reveal some things about that in a way that make that either seem a little bit more, interesting, or, where there's some wonder and marvel about it, or just in the end, appreciation for it, And so, yeah, that's kind of like the intro is where I kind of set my foundation of where I'm coming from and how I'm going to do this. And then trying to make the idea that like understanding a little bit of the body can be really valuable. The second part, I just jump into, I basically have, right, as it stands right now, I have 8 different ideas, like kind of concepts that then serve as lenses to look at the body, to see that in the body, but also to see it in nature as a whole, right? So an example of what I've already said is adaptation, right? And we can see the way things adapt in the body, like calluses and muscle strength and all that kind of stuff. And then also to see that in nature, where that happens with, the way a tree adapts to its environment in terms of how it grows its root structure. If it's mostly rocky, I know I've seen trees where the roots are all grown around the rock and kind of grabbing onto it because there's no necessarily dirt right there, but it's still, it adapts to what's there.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an example. Another one would just be like flow. There's lots of different examples of flow in the body, the movement of our blood and the other fluids, and the flow of our breath, the flow of movement, right? Even the flow of our thoughts over time. And then, of course, we see flow in all these different areas, just water movement and the way the weather patterns move, and then how flow, and even things like the way time seems to flow, just basically a variety of different concepts so that we can see these things in the body and in nature, where the bottom line is that the body comes from nature. It's of nature. You know what I mean? Like there's another side to this where at the beginning, I talk about how there's a way of thinking about science, like the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, as merely a description of nature as it already is. Right? If we didn't figure this stuff out, it would still be doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
In the way that it's doing it. Right? So physics and chemistry and these things are really just where we have, because of our own innate capacities and abilities as human beings, we've figured it out. We've learned that there's an equation for gravity and there's an equation for, electromagnetism and all these fundamental forces in nature. And so if we step back and look at it that way, nature is just this whole thing, and that there's a way of thinking about the human body as a product of all of this, and I think in the end that the gesture behind this section of the book is just to stop and appreciate our sense of connectedness to the larger whole, but through the physical body.
Yeah.
Right. Through seeing nature in the physical body and vice versa, so that could also lend itself to some of these kinds of parallels that we're walking around in nature and we're reminded of the body. You know what I mean? Just just feeling that sense of connectedness to the world that we're in. So then in the third section, I go about breaking down all the major systems of the body. Like if we were to go to a typical physiology textbook, at this point they divide the body into 11 systems. And so I've just taken those 11 systems and put them in their own kind of categories that sort of jive together. And also as a way, is almost this is where my engineering degree maybe plays into this a little bit, but a little bit of reverse engineering the body, right? If we look at the body and how it works in this way, what can we understand about the body as a whole, in terms of its needs or the nature of it, you know? So I guess an easy example would be the breath is always moving. The fluids in the body, the blood is always moving. So in some ways that can show us that our whole body needs to always be moving. Therein lies the benefit. That there's a resonance there. And so I do that. I divide the systems of the body into 4 categories. And these would be design principles of the human body. So there are things like structure, flow, energy. And then the last one I just call connection, which is a way to look at the nervous system and the endocrine system as the 2 systems that connect us to reality. They're the 2 systems largely thought responsible for our conscious awareness and how that goes, right? And so, so the third section is just an overview of the systems. And then the fourth, I get into just kind of a certain kind of overview of anatomy. I'm certainly not trying to recreate a full-blown anatomy book.
Yeah.
Right? That already exists, and there's some really good versions of it. But I am still just trying to maybe have a little bit of a pocket guide version of it. And then in particular, some of the insights I feel like I've gained over time by doing massage therapy, by teaching anatomy for both the massage school and also more currently for yoga trainings. Just in terms of it's one thing to know that we have a muscle and what it does. It's another thing to maybe get a little bit of insight on again, from a more holistic view, what are the things we need to think about in terms of our low back or our hip based on the human anatomy? What can we kind of get in terms of areas that we want to keep functional, right? And functional means the right amount of strength, the right amount of flexibility, to kind of keep doing all the things we're doing in life. Then the 5th section gets into, it's really just kind of this body maintenance idea that I talked about with yoga, tai chi, or really whatever you want to call it. The body requires maintenance in order to keep it functional, right? And I think I focus on it that way. It's because our access to life and our life activities is determined by how functional our body is, So particularly this is where then we get into looking at aging, right? So the 5th section just kind of talks about body maintenance and the things that I think would be the characteristics or the parts of the practice, whatever it looks like, that would make it qualify as a body maintenance practice, right? I think yoga and Tai Chi already got it covered if you just look at it that way. But otherwise, if somebody wants to do something else, they can turn whatever it is they're already doing into a body maintenance practice. I think as long as they're giving everything their full paces. That doesn't always happen. Like if somebody's really into biking, they can be cardiovascularly fit. They can be really strong in a lot of areas of their body, but they may not be super flexible, or, you know, certain things about how their body is adapted to riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
Right. Can leave some things out that become liabilities. So that's where the idea of taking everything through its paces becomes important. And so then the last section just kind of covers pain, healing, aging, and death, right? Which are all things that we experience because we have a body. You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, just talking about what pain is and getting again into the relationship we have with it. Some people have one that it makes them shy away from a lot of things. Other people have it that they're just constantly overriding their pain response in a way that can sometimes get people into big trouble. And then what healing and what is it? You know, I don't try to necessarily, like promote a particular modality, but just looking at like, if we step back and look what is healing, it's a kind of it's restoring a function. Maybe that means it's a restoring of balance. Maybe that means that there's some sort of catharsis involved, some sort of release or purging, right? So like when we have the flu, a lot of the purging that goes on is about the body getting itself back to health, you know? So, and then, so to the aging trip, I think is a really important one from a massage therapy point of view. I feel like I've seen a lot of people as they get older, they're trying to hold themselves to how they used to be. And as the body naturally changes as we age, that's not always a good fit, you know, because it's hard to know where the line is until after we've crossed it, you know, and if you cross certain lines, you might tear an ACL, or you might really wreck your shoulder in a way, or blow out a disc in your spine or whatever. And those become things that can become long-term problems. Right? So I think that's where, you know, it makes sense that if we can get a little bit more awareness in the earlier stages of the game, we might be able to prevent some of those radical injuries down the line, because we're always just kind of sort of forcing the body to do what we used to do. Yeah. You know, at some point it's got to change, right? There's nobody at 80 years old who's rocking it like they were when they were 25. So there's definitely a naturalness to the waning of function. The tricky part is where do we draw the line? Like at what point do you start to lay off so you don't hurt yourself? You know, it's not doing the things. It's just doing them at a lighter pace or a lighter weight, or something where you're really just, again, you're really feeling the exertion, but not in a way where you might push yourself to an injury. I think as a massage therapist, that's been sometimes the most heartbreaking thing, is times where I feel like I've worked with people who are trying to help themselves and they end up hurting themselves. You know, and what's the difference? Well, they haven't had a chance, I guess, maybe even to consider being more mindful about what they're doing, instead of pushing, right, to keep up with the class, or pushing to just do the 3 sets of 15 because I always do 3 sets of 15, where on some days 2 sets might be enough. You know? I mean, I don't know. I've danced around this quite a bit because I understand that at least some of what I'm saying might go against the grain of a lot of fitness culture, where it's no pain, no gain, or, you know, if you lay off all the time, you're never going to get to your full potential.
Leave it all on the floor.
Right. And I totally understand that. I think it's very human to do so. You know, I just think that people should know what risks they're taking along the way. Right. Because, I think sometimes we get pain where there's it's a warning shot, right? If we keep doing this in this way without sorting something out, we're going to eventually get injured. Other times pain can be something that's just this sort of psychological resistance, you know, and it's hard to know the difference. And that part I get. So I think at this point, because I've been working with so many people in pain, I think over time, as I've gotten older, it's helped me be more conservative about my approach.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to go at it so hard that I might hurt myself, but I'll go at it hard enough to keep my body functional. Right.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even this is where, you know, the aging piece in particular. I mean, I know for me, if I make it to 80, I want to be able to move around. And so that's that sort of keeping my body functional piece, because I don't want to end up 80 and having to just be really limited in what I can do in terms of just getting around.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes when we look at aging and death, that also can kind of help us, I don't know, establish a sense of what we're aiming for, right? I mean, it's great it's great to excel at a certain activity, and it certainly feels good. But at some point, you know, the demands or the work put in on trying to be excellent all the time in these things, it can often lead us into an injury.
Yeah.
You know, that then cascades into its own set of experiences that aren't always that fun. You know, you end up with a really bad knee because you pushed through things so hard, so frequently. 30 years down the road, you're walking around with a limp all the time or whatever that is, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like, I mean, I think yoga and Tai Chi really sort of show what's possible just based on the number of old people. Like when we see much older people doing those practices, they're still in the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's because they've been doing this maintenance practice, right?
Yeah.
Which is just a consistent set of movements and exercises that keep every part of your body functional at a very base level, right? Then you would apply that to whatever your specific activities are, sports and exercises. And also that same baseline of functionality gets applied to all the mundane things in life, like shoveling snow, picking kids up off the floor, or just, you know, whatever it is. And those kinds of mundane things, I've often seen people hurt themselves just doing that.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't have the full sort of functionality hasn't been maintained over time.
Yeah.
You know, so I think just to kind of wrap it all up, you know, it's like what I'm really aiming for, you know, through insight and some artistry here is just around, I don't know, restoring a sense of appreciation for the body. And then from that, for life itself, for getting to be here and do all these things, like tasting good food and enjoying music and, you know, even sex is a physical bodily activity.
Yeah.
You know? And so we get to have that because of the body.
Yeah.
You know? So let's just like appreciate that once in a while.
Yeah.
Like, again, like in contrast of just taking it for granted until it's gone. Like, I think that's kind of the key thing.
Yeah.
So it's sort of an anti-textbook, you know, but it's still a textbook.
Yeah.
It's just presented in a very different way with a different kind of like, with a different kind of context to it, so that it can be a little lighter and more fun and more relevant. You know? It's like, I'm so glad my heart does what it does because it does that. I get to do this.
Yeah.
I'm so glad my muscles do what they do because they do. I get to do this, and on down the line, you know?
Yeah. Remembering to be grateful for the gift of life.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Well, that's awesome, Alejandro. I'll definitely, I appreciate you coming on and just sharing all these insights. Hopefully, you know, people listen, get inspired to connect a little deeper with their own bodies and, you know, their own existence in the body.
That's it.
And I'd definitely love to have you back on as you work on the book and when you finish it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to reading it myself.
Yeah.
And really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jordan. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Bye, Earthlings.
Adios.